Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this on-demand session of the EDUCAUSE 2020 online conference, which is entitled Learning Spaces Around the World. So my name is John Augeri. Despite my first name, I'm French, actually, so you're going to have to excuse me for the accent I'm going to certainly keep in few parts of the speech I'm going to have today. I'm actually belonging to a multiple consortium of multiple universities, which is based in Paris, France, which is the location where I'm recording this video today, which is called Île-de-France Digital University. We mutualize a lot of things among the universities of Paris area on digital matters, infrastructure, services, practices, contents, and we have a pretty huge insight on the learning spaces, of course. I also would like to mention that beyond these activities that I have in Paris, I'm doing quite a lot of things abroad, especially for my research about the learning spaces. And regarding this, I would like to mention those 4 universities in Japan that have been kind enough to welcome me as visiting researcher since 2017. Actually, the last day I've had over there was at Sophia University in Tokyo. I came back from there on February 2020, just before the very exceptional and very sad events that we are all experiencing around the world. Beside those institutional involvements, I'm also having quite a lot of activities in committees, associations, work groups, and of course the first one is the EDUCAUSE, and especially the EDUCAUSE Learning Space Community Group. Among other things, I'm actually doing the translation, some of the translations of the learning space rating system that we're going to discuss a little bit later. Another tool that we're going to present later, which is the FlexSpace online repository. I'm very happy to act as a core member of this group. And finally, I would like to mention the Association for Learning Environment, and especially the Australasia branch, for which I'm acting now since 2 years as international juror for the Design Award, the annual Design Award that they are organizing. So the reason why I'm giving this session this year again is actually that it's the focus of my research, which is an international comparative study of learning spaces. I'm conducting that project since 2016. To give you the range, we are talking about international range today. So this is the range, basically North America, Europe, Asia, and Oceania. Some numbers about this research. The things you're going to see came from the visits of approximately 270 spaces, 160 institutions, 4 continents, as I said. And this is approximately the 100th talk I'm giving in conferences about the international situation, international trends of learning spaces. The interesting thing is that I spoke 100 times. The interesting thing is that this is a hot topic everywhere. And of course, this year, everything is special, and we all have to reconsider the position of the physical learning spaces in our context. But beyond that, definitely the learning spaces became a very hot topic in many of the higher education focused conferences, which explain that number of 100 talks. Among those talks, actually, I'm now giving since 4 years this overview of the global situation of learning spaces at the EDUCAUSE annual conference. It began in 2017. And every year I'm giving an update, and I really want to emphasize on that word update, because definitely the things I'm going to discuss with you today are things I didn't discuss at all in Philadelphia 3 years ago. So this is a pretty moving, pretty evolving topic every year that makes the thing very interesting, very challenging as well. But anyway, every year I'm very happy to have this talk at the EDUCAUSE conference. To finish this introduction, I would like to explain you the way I'm conducting this international comparative study. Basically, this is the framework I'm using. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Just to mention that usually, and maybe you're going to agree with me, when people are talking about learning spaces, it's very easy, very obvious, very automatic to focus on two key topics, which are the layout, so the furnishing, and the technology that we're going to put on those spaces. Of course, these are very important things, no questions about that, but I wanted to get the big picture of the learning spaces, meaning, for instance, the location on the campuses. Where do we put them? Are they centralized, or are they spread across the campus? How the BYOD is integrated, type of governance, the design and assessment tools that we use, new services they include, and of course, on the bottom right, what kind of inflections can we observe on the teaching and learning practices, which is certainly for all of us the most important thing. So that introduction being done, let's now dive in our topic of today, and let's discuss about the spaces themselves. And first of all, I would like to remind you the kind of learning spaces that we can meet on the campuses. And the first of them, of course, is the active learning classrooms. This is an example from Japan, Kyushu Institute of Technology, new generation of classrooms. Second type, usually the new generation lecture theaters. We call them usually collaborative lecture theaters, such as this one in McGill, Montreal, Canada. The Learning Commons. This one is in Osaka International University in Japan. And the new generation of libraries, lastly, that usually we call learning centers, with, for instance, this very nice example of north of Japan in Akita International University. So 4 main categories. This is usually the categorization that I'm using in my research: active learning classrooms, collaborative lecture theaters, learning commons, learning centers. Those 4 categories being divided in 2 main families: the formal spaces, with the active learning classrooms, and the collaborative lecture theaters, formal in the sense that they are involving a direct interaction between the teacher and the students, and the informal ones, with the learning commons and learning centers on the right, that are more designed to make the students work in autonomy. So first trend I would like to highlight is actually a trend that is dealing with the active learning classrooms, the very active learning classrooms that all of us know. And this trend is actually to mention how diverse they are becoming. And I would like to illustrate that through few examples. This one from University of Washington, with collaborative tables, fixed collaborative tables with video sharing features on the tables. This one in Kyushu University, west of Japan, which is completely different in the type of equipment, very light movable tables, but it's still an active learning classroom. This one in Melbourne, Monash University, which is mixing different kind of furnishing. This one in University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. The one we just saw on the video in west of Japan, Kyushu Institute of Technology, or lastly this one in Curtin University in West Australia in Perth. So those pics, I think, are really highlighting how diverse those active learning classrooms can be in terms of configuration and equipment. And I would like to mention that because sometimes it's very easy for many colleagues to imagine that there is a magic recipe to design an active learning classroom, which would be that one. Let's put movable furnishing, flexible configuration, let's put a lot of technology, and we're going to have an active learning classroom. Yes, some of them are fitting with those basics, but some of them don't. And so the advice I would like to give you, and this is more than an advice, this is a trend that I can observe through the diversity of the active learning classrooms I can see all across the world. Let's go beyond the dogma. There is no magical recipe. There are very different kinds of active learning classrooms, and this actually can also be confirmed through 2 key tools that I would like to highlight right now. The Learning Space Rating System, which has been designed by the EDUCAUSE Learning Space Community Group that I'm belonging to, which is basically a pre-occupancy evaluation framework for those very active learning classrooms that is also a very nice source of inspiration through good practices. And the second tool is the FlexSpace online repository. So this is basically a database of learning spaces, but it's much more than that. This is really a community tools with a lot of very valuable exchanges. You have a screenshot right here. This is free to use for academics, so please don't hesitate to open an account, not only to get inspirations from the several hundreds of examples that are already showcased, but also to upload yours and really, feed those exchanges that we have through this very nice tool. It's a lot of work to make it growing, and clearly it's a work in perfect complementarity with the learning space rating system I just mentioned. So through those two tools, you're going to have really many different kind of examples of active learning classrooms that are definitely showing how diverse they can be in terms of configuration. But more than diverse, and this is a trend that I can observe since a couple of years now, which is pretty recent, beside the generic active learning classrooms, the ones you can schedule, in which you can schedule, I don't know, science classes, humanities classes, any kind of classes, now we can see, and this is another way to show the diversity, specialized active learning classrooms. And I would like to give you some examples of them. Let's go back to McGill in Montreal, Canada. They have designed these chemistry active learning classrooms that are using collaborative tables, but for chemistry. Same thing for geology here, the same institution. Colorado School of Mine designed biology active learning classrooms, such as this one, using once again collaborative tables. University of Technology Sydney in Australia, once again, chemistry-focused active learning classrooms. And sometimes we have some merging between the topic of the active learning, and so the active learning classrooms, and the new technology, visualization technologies that we are discussing more and more on the campuses, augmented reality, virtual reality, visualization technologies. And for instance, in Perth, West Australia, they have a room which is definitely designed for the active learning, that is providing this kind of devices, visualization devices. This second one is a panoramic screen that you can control with a gesture. And this is definitely a nice convergence between the learning spaces and those new visualization technologies. But it's clearly highlighting these new kinds of active learning classrooms that we can see on the campuses. So this is the key trend, I can say, of the active learning classroom diversity. I'm going to be very quick on the second category of learning spaces, the collaborative lecture theaters, for the simple reason that they still remain by far the rarest type of learning spaces to be observed on the campuses. We could discuss that, the reasons of this rarity, in a separate session, and I would be very happy to discuss that with you in a direct contact. But it's very, very rare, even though we have very nice examples, for instance, such as this one in Vancouver, in University of British Columbia, new generation, very nicely refurbished lecture theaters, which is designed for the active learning activities. This one next to Sydney in Australia, in Newcastle, also very nicely with those sort of diner tables. This one in Queensland University of Technology, still in Australia, very nicely designed. It's a School of Design, by the way. And lastly, more conventional, but very wide, very nicely designed as well. This one in Monash University next to Melbourne. So very nice examples, but once again, those collaborative lecture theaters are very, very rare on the campuses. So this is basically what I wanted to tell you in terms of key trends about the formal spaces and the active learning classrooms and the collaborative lecture theater. So diversity for the classrooms, once again, with all the examples I shown you, and the rarity, increasing rarity of the collaborative lecture theaters or any kind of new generation of lecture theaters. Now I would like to switch on the informal learning spaces, the learning commons and the learning centers. First by mentioning once again, I already mentioned that 2 years ago in my EDUCAUSE sessions, that there is a real shift of the institution governance focus towards those kind of spaces. If the active learning classrooms were the entry point of many institutions' strategy for learning spaces, now the focus is really shifting to such kind of informal spaces for many reasons. One of them is that there are studies showing that the students are spending more and more time in such kind of spaces. So what are we talking about? We are talking about such kind of things. This is in Auckland, in New Zealand, Auckland University of Technology. So you have different kind of subspaces in which the students can spend time to work by themselves, just to relax for some of them, or having group working activities. This is in Newcastle, next to Sydney in Australia, University of Newcastle. This is Yasuda University in Hiroshima in Japan. We have this nice example of Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia. This is a self-access learning center designed like a coffee shop in Kanda University of International Study next to Tokyo in Japan. This is Nanyang University in Singapore that totally refurbished its library to have this very nice open space at the entrance with many different kind of subspace around. The famous Hunt Library of North Carolina State University, very often mentioned as one of the reference of innovative libraries in North America now, which is completely deserved. This very nice area, atrium-shaped area in University of Melbourne in Australia. This Learning Commons in Osaka International University. Or you have also bigger things, such as this entire building in Nanyang University in Singapore once again, or this very interesting future University of Hakodate in North Japan, in which the overall design of the campus is really open, as you may see, and you have the many different kind of subspaces, including the circles on the right that actually are the lectures area. In any case, what I would like to say following those examples is that if I come back to my four main categories, I was mentioning the two families, formal and informal spaces, and I wanted to say by that sometimes we have a sort of artificial border between the two of them, artificial separation. And one of the things I can observe now, this is really a key trend, is the disappearance of this border. What I want to say is that in some of the examples you just saw, you have basically the space is an official and informal space, but you have more and more formal activities inside. I mean that you can have formal classes using a learning commons, formal classes using a learning center, or having small lectures in a collaborative way, delivered in a collaborative way in the presentation space of a learning commons or a learning centers. Once again, if you guys are interested by that, please feel free to get in touch with me. I can give you more details about that, but definitely this border between the formal and informal spaces is tending to disappear. Even more through a very significant trend that I can observe as well across the globe that I would like to present now, which is basically the appearance of a new kind of learning space on the campuses, which is actually between the formal and the informal ones, right here. And these are called the transitional spaces. So those transitional spaces being once again in the between of the formal and the informal ones are creating a physical and functional continuity of the learning spaces all across the campuses, meaning that the learning spaces are not limited to a precise locations anymore. They are really spread across the campus, and between the different kind of spaces that we knew before, you can have those transitional spaces that bring, once again, a physical and functional continuity in the teaching and learning practices, and especially in the learning practices. So practically speaking, what is the position of those transitional spaces in the geography of the campuses? So for that, I would like to quickly show you the different kind of typologies that you might find on the campuses regarding the learning spaces. You have the decentralized model, which is usually a legacy of multiple local strategies, having active learning classrooms in this building, active learning classroom in that graduate school, a learning commons in the library, okay? You have the centralized model that is tending to gather all the learning spaces, whether they should be formal or informal, in the same location that is becoming an iconic location on the campus. And you have more and more a mixed model, which is actually keeping some decentralized active learning classrooms and having this iconic building with the centralization of all the other spaces. So in that mixed model, for instance, you could have specialized active learning classrooms like the one I showed you before in the graduate schools, and having generic active learning classrooms and learning commons, for instance, in the library. This is a type of configuration that you may find. So where are the transitional space in that scheme? Actually, you might find them right there in many areas in the between of the physical learning spaces, whether they can be formal or informal ones. And those transitional spaces, once again, how do they look like, practically speaking? You're going to have, for instance, such kind of things at the entrance of a learning center. This is in University of Washington. the Augeri library at the entrance. So this is a place where the students might stop and relax. This is at the entrance of a library in EDUCAUSE University in Perth in Australia. This is North Carolina State University Hunt Library. This is in Adelaide, Flinders University in Australia, Colorado School of Mines. Very interesting way to reuse a part of the stairs to make they become some transitional spaces, such as these ones. This is inside the Self-Access Learning Center. Basically, the stair can be a learning space. It can become a presentation space as well. The entrance of Flinders University Library in Adelaide. This is in sunny Stony Brook, Long Island. This is in Mukogawa University in Kobe in Japan, Curtin University in Perth, or Monash University in Melbourne in Australia. So many different kind of those spaces, and clearly there is a trend to see them being more and more present and more used by the students, once again, because they bring this functional and physical continuity of the learning spaces all across the campuses. So this is certainly one of the biggest trends to observe currently about the learning spaces. And that brings me to the end of this presentation. So once again, I would be more than happy to give you more details about that, about all those the topics, all the trends I shown you today. So please feel free to contact me if needed. So it was a pleasure for me to interact about this pretty hot topic that we all have on our campuses. Thank you very much for your attention on today. Bye-bye.